Good evening. Nice. I'm Cleve Quinter. I'm the manager of author and speaker engagement here at the Pratt. Thank you all so much for coming out on this gorgeous August evening. It's supposed to start raining any day now. So, a couple things before we start. Leonard will be out here in a minute. He'll speak for about 30 to 40 minutes. Then we'll have time for your questions. There's a microphone there. And there's a microphone there. We have folks watching at home via our YouTube and Facebook pages. So if you do have a question, I ask that you ask it from one of those microphones. If you can't make it to an event and you'd like to be here, know that 90% of our programs are online and we archive them at our YouTube and Facebook page. So just take note of that. Ivy Bookshop is our on-site book selling partner tonight. So if you don't have a copy of the book already, please purchase one on your way out. After the program, Leonard will come out. He'll sign at the table there, be happy to chat with you further and personalize your books. And then finally, if you don't know after 2 years that we validate parking, I'm telling you now that we do. I think my first year here, I was just champion for just free parking. That's just what I became known for. And to the point, yes, to the point now where I feel that it's my duty to tell you that the Franklin Street Garage now has a new system in place as of last Friday. So if you are a regular, we don't do coins anymore. I know this is an inside joke, if a joke at all for people who have been here before, but everything is now digitized. So when you do have a problem with a garage, now that it's digitized, I can't wait to talk to you about it. This evening, I'm happy to welcome Leonard Pitts Jr. to the Pratt Library to discuss his new novel, 54 Miles. In it, he looks at the fateful weeks of March 1965, from the infamous Bloody Sunday March to the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma on the 7th to the triumphant entry into Montgomery on the 25th that climaxed the voting rights campaign. And the families who find themselves confronting the past amid another flashpoint in American history. Leonard Pitts Jr. is the author of the novels Last Thing You Surrender, Grant Park, Freeman, and Before I Forget, as well as 2 works of nonfiction. He was a journalist for more than 40 years, including a long tenure as a nationally syndicated columnist for the Miami Herald. He is a winner of the 2004 Pulitzer Prize for Commentary, in addition to many other awards. Author Denise Nichols writes, in his stirring new novel, Leonard Pitts Jr. takes us back to 1965 Selma, around and through the dizzying changes happening in a society to tell a deeply reflective story of 2 families dealing not only with that era's upheavals, but also memories of brutal and painful past. Best-selling author Michael Eric Dyson calls Leonard Pitts Jr. one of the most gifted writers of historical fiction. 50 Miles is a true literary tour de force. And Pulitzer Prize-winning author Jonathan Eig calls 54 Miles a stunning historical novel, heart-wrenching, propulsive, and beautifully written. Leonard Pitts Jr. works powerful magic in this unforgettable story. It's my great pleasure to welcome Leonard Pitts Jr. back to the Pratt Library.
Good evening. How's everybody? Good. Thank you all for coming out on this balmy afternoon or I guess early evening here in Baltimore. I appreciate it. I know you had other places that you could have been. I thank you that you chose to spend part of your evening with me. I want to spend a few moments talking about and then reading from my novel, 54 Miles. And then what my great hope is that it's somewhere in that talking and reading, I will have raised some kinds of questions so that you guys we can have a little give and take. If you don't ask me questions, I'm going to start asking you questions, and it'll be kind of embarrassing. So let's stick to the original format. To answer a question that I've been receiving a lot about the title of the book, 54 Miles is the distance from Selma, Alabama to Montgomery, Alabama, down Highway 80. There are 5 major characters of my novel. I want to run through them real quickly. There is Adam, who is the biracial son of 2 of the other characters, who is a college-age student who slips out of New York City in Harlem, where he's been raised, and goes down to Alabama, very much against his parents' wishes, to participate in the voting rights campaign down there that was being organized by SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. The other characters include, as I said, his parents. George is a minister who served in the military, was a Marine during the Second World War. Thelma, George is white. Thelma, his mother, is an African-American woman who is a lawyer and works for a legal aid society in Harlem. And finally, the 5th character is Luther. Luther is Adam's uncle and Thelma's brother. When Adam and Thelma were young, when Adam was 9 and Thelma was not yet 3 years old, they saw their parents murdered. They saw their parents lynched in the most horrific way possible. They saw them burned alive at the front door, and then body parts taken as souvenirs by people who wanted them, and then postcards taken of that. So that has kind of defined, that trauma has rather defined Luther's life. 54 Miles is a novel about several things. There's 2 major plot lines. One I'm sorry, forgot to tell you about the 5th character. The 5th character is the civil rights movement, and specifically the voting rights campaign that I alluded to a moment ago. And even more specifically than that, the 3 marches across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, the abortive march that began on March the 7th and was ended in violence, the march 2 days later on March 9th, which came to be known as Turnaround Tuesday, and finally the march that began on the 21st of March, and then made it all the way to Montgomery. That one was led by Martin Luther King Jr. As I was about to say, there are 2 major themes of this book. The first is Adam's discovery of a family secret while he is in Alabama. He discovers something so destructive that it makes him hate himself and makes him furious at his mother and sort of estranged from his mother. He discovers that that they are not, and he is not what he and they have always thought they were. And the discovery of this secret traumatizes, or I should say re-traumatizes Thelma, and forces her to return to Alabama. She hadn't been in Alabama since 1945. You could not pay Thelma to go to Alabama. Thelma hates Alabama. Because Alabama is the seed and the source of all the trauma of her life. But her son discovers this secret, and then her son goes missing in Alabama. And again, this is the period of Goodman, Cheney, and Schwerner. This is the period of, the 4 little girls, excuse me, in the Birmingham church. This is a period when people going missing, especially Black people going missing in the South, is a terrifying thing. So Thelma returns to the seatbed of all of her trauma in order to find and to save her son. The second major plot thread involves Luther. I had mentioned that he has seen this, he saw this lynching when he was 9 years old. Again, Thelma was so young, she can't quite remember it, but Luther was of an age, again, he was 9, he can't forget it. And it has defined his life. And when we meet him again in 1965, he has made what kind of rough peace he can. He stopped drinking. He's not an alcoholic anymore. Oh, no, let me rephrase that. He's a recovering alcoholic. He's not drinking anymore. He's got a little business. He's a barber and owns a shop on Davis Avenue, which was the main drag for African Americans in Mobile, Alabama. And he's doing okay. He lives by himself. He's always been alone. And he's it's not a great life, but it's his life, and he's okay. And then while visiting a friend at a nursing home, he accidentally encounters a man named Floyd Bitters. Floyd Bitters is bedridden. He recently he's had a stroke. He can't communicate. All he can do is grunt and sort of smile. And Floyd Bitters is the man who led the mob that killed Luther's parents. And as those of you who are familiar with the way lynch law and lynch justice went will not be surprised to hear that he never was brought to justice. Nothing ever happened to him. And now all of a sudden Luther is alone in a room with this bedridden old man 43 years later. So the second major plot line of the book is, what does Luther do? What does justice look like all these years later? I want to read you a brief excerpt from the second chapter. Excuse me. And this is Adam walking across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. I wanted to read this to you because I had a young reader talking to me about this book a couple of days ago, and she was saying how the book brought alive for her the events of that day. And that made me really feel glad, one, because it was the aim that I set out for, but also because it's my feeling, especially in an era where we are going out of our way, or some people are going out of their way to delegitimize, to stigmatize, and to make illegal the teaching of African American history, that these are important things to know. And to the degree that they do know them, our kids basically know, what happened on the Pettus Bridge on March 7th as about a 10-minute clip that shows on the news every March 7th. It's the tail end of CBS News, and if it's a monumental year, like the 40th or the 50th anniversary, then somebody gives a speech and they see that. But I don't think there's any real sense of what happened on that bridge and what the people who were on that bridge went through. So I want to read a little bit of that, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the book, and then I want to hear from you. All good? Okay. This is Adam. As I said, Adam has snuck down to Alabama to participate in this, and he finds himself side by side. Adam is 21. He finds himself side by side with a teenage girl named Emma. The line began to move. They walked in silence, 2 blocks down Sylvan to Water Street, where they turned right. Adam glanced at Emma. She was staring straight ahead, her gaze resolute. White people on the sidewalk gaped after them as they passed. Cars slowed. Still, there was quiet, save for the soft scraping of their feet and the low rumble of the support vehicles following their procession. 2 of those vehicles, he knew, were ambulances. 3 were hearses. The hearses were only being used to ferry supplies. Still, they were hearses. They turned left at Broad Street, and there stood the bridge looming above them, a tower of girders and bolts lifting the empty ribbon of asphalt, which had been closed to vehicle traffic, over the Alabama River. I wonder who Edmund Pettus was, Adam asked no one in particular as he read the name emblazoned across the structure. Emma said, he was some Confederate general, Grand Dragon of the Alabama Klan. Adam shook his head. He was in the KKK, so they put his name on a bridge? I guess if he lynched somebody, they'd have elected him governor. The girl met his eyes, and Adam had the impression that on any other morning she might have laughed. Like I told you, she said, you a long way from home. The line continued forward, climbing the narrow sidewalk on the left side of the bridge. Adam glanced over the railing and saw fractured sunlight rippling on the muddy water below. The Alabama River was a long way down, and he couldn't swim. He tried not to think about that. At the crest of the bridge, the line stopped. Adam couldn't quite believe what he saw below him, a phalanx of law enforcement officers stretching across all 4 lanes of Route 80. He'd have sworn every cop in Alabama was down there waiting for them. State troopers, sheriff's deputies, posse men. Emergency lights flashed on the police cars. About a dozen troopers were mounted on horseback. And there were spectators, white people, everywhere. Some crowded the parking lot of the Chicken Treat restaurant. Others stood out in front of the Pontiac dealership and the mattress store. Some had climbed up on the hoods of their cars. Confederate flags billowed. It was like a football game. Adam tried to swallow, but his throat was too stiff. Jesus, said the girl. She spoke it in a whisper. Or maybe, he thought, it was a prayer. And the line moved forward. Up front, John, this is John Lewis, had his hands in the pockets of his raincoat, a small backpack over his left shoulder. Hosea Williams, said something to him. Adam couldn't quite make out what it was. John shook his head slightly. His expression radiated a resolute intensity, the focused determination to face whatever needed facing. The 2 men led the line of marchers to within 50 feet of the state troopers. There, they stopped again. Some of the troopers Adam saw were busy affixing strange contraptions over their heads. Latches clicked shut. The devices made them look like alien invaders. Large insectoid eyes, long elephantine trunks, gas masks, he whispered. The girl said, Jesus, again. A trooper stepped forward, speaking into a bullhorn. It would be detrimental to your safety to continue this march, he said. His amplified voice sounded thin and vaguely unreal. And I'm saying that this is an unlawful assembly. You are to disperse. You are ordered to disperse. Go home or go to your church. Is that clear to you? I've got nothing further to say to you. Hosea Williams said, may we have a word with the major? The trooper said, there is no word to be had. You have 2 minutes to turn around and go back to your church. And for a moment, they stood there facing one another. The white man, bristling with all the authority of the sovereign state of Alabama, the Negro men and women facing all that power with only bone and flesh. Finally, John said, we should kneel and pray. Hosea nodded and began to pass the word, which was when the trooper barked an order into the bullhorn. Troopers, advance! They came on at a march, billy clubs held chest high, parallel to the ground, as if to push the marchers back. But something seemed to come over the state troopers as this hammer of white power met the wall of Negro resistance. The moment teetered as if on a fulcrum. Then police discipline and order broke like something brittle, and the white men began to stampede. A tidal wave of blue uniforms and helmets sweeping through the line of Negro protest. From the sidelines, a rebel yell went shrieking up from the spectators in the parking lot like their team had just scored a touchdown. Adam went down under the wave of uniformed authority. As he scrambled clear, a state trooper lunged for him, truncheon high. Adam threw up his arms to ward off the blow, but the trooper tripped on a scrum of black and white humanity tangled together on the ground and staggered to his left. Adam took the reprieve, clambering to his feet. He heard the clop of horses' hooves, more rebel yells. Get them goddamn niggers, someone screamed. It was a girl's voice. To the left, Adam saw John on his knees, dazed. To the right, he saw Hosea running flat out, some little girl wriggling in his arms as he apparently tried to help her get away. He finally put her down, and she sprinted ahead of him. A club thudded into the side of John's head, and he dropped. A mounted man with a bat wrapped in barbed wire was chasing after some young Negro man. Get back here, nigger, he cried. Adam stood there, stunned, as chaos broke wide all around him. It seemed like some terrible waking dream. Then the reality of the thing came home with the crack of a bullwhip and a slashing pain across his back. He wheeled about and saw a man on horseback riding down on him. Adam flinched to the side, avoiding a direct collision, but was staggered by the animal's flank. Somehow he kept his footing. Somehow he ran. Or he tried to. Adam took 2 steps, then stopped short when he saw the girl, Emma. She was standing there on wobbly legs, shrieking at the madness that swirled around her. No words, just palpable terror and rage. Adam started toward her, but a white man on horseback got there first. A booted kick to the head broke her glasses and dropped the teenager to the pavement where she did not move. Adam took another step, trying to reach her. There came a sharp cracking sound, and he whipped around in disbelief, his brain screaming. They had opened fire. The white men were shooting at them. But no, bullets weren't flying. Instead, clouds of white smoke began to billow over the bridge. Tear gas. Even as he realized this, Adam sucked down a lungful of the noxious cloud. It was like sucking down fire. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't see. His eyes burned so badly he would have gladly ripped them from his head with his own hands. Adam stood there coughing, blind, and helpless, his ears reporting carnage all around him. Horses' hooves, screaming, feet moving in every direction, moans. Get them niggers! Adam Simon was going to die on this bridge. He knew it as surely as he knew his own name. But he couldn't just stand here and wait for it to happen. Arms outstretched, hoping to touch any landmark, anything that might give him some guidance, he staggered about in the mist. Then his foot struck something yielding. Adam strained to get his eyes to focus. Through tears, he realized it was her, the girl, Emma. Her face was a bloody mess. He wasn't sure she was conscious. He wasn't sure she was alive. Adam gave a violent cough. Nausea was a snake burrowing its way up from his gut. Snot and tears dripped down his face. He patted Emma's cheek roughly. Are you okay? He cried. Her eyes flickered. Come on, he said. We've got to get out of here. On the southbound lane of the bridge, some man was doubled over, retching. From somewhere far away, white people were laughing and cheering. They really showed them niggers, huh? Adam could not bring Emma to. She was a rag doll. Horses' hooves made a thunder on the asphalt. The troopers were chasing marchers through the chemical fog, apparently all the way back to the chapel. Adam didn't want to carry this girl. He wasn't even sure he could carry himself, but he had no choice. He hooked her armpits and began dragging her body through the white cloud. It was slow going. His eyes were still tearing. His chest was a fire pit. He thought of his mother and all the tragedy she had lived. She deserved better than this. He wished he hadn't snuck out of town to come here. He wished he hadn't been embarrassed by her and Dad. He wished a lot of things. "I'm sorry, Mom," which is when he heard the horse coming at full gallop. Adam spun just in time to see it emerge from the cloud, like a specter from some nightmare, a trooper in a gas mask sitting astride, his club already on its downward arc. Adam's brain ordered his body to move, but he never had a chance. The truncheon struck his head with a solid crunch. He dropped Emma. The world spun away from him. He saw blood flying up. Then the pavement was coming at him. And that was the last thing Adam Simon knew. So that's, good. Thank you. So that's a little bit from the, technically it's the first chapter because there's a prologue that comes before it, but that's the few pages from 54 Miles. I should mention 54 Miles, for those of you who read my last novel, The Last Thing You Surrender. 54 Miles takes those same characters from that novel and moves them 20 years forward. Adam is actually born in the previous novel, The Last Thing You Surrender, which unfolds against the backdrop of World War II. This novel, I wanted to deal with themes of what does justice look like, and what is the role, if any, of forgiveness. And here I'm thinking specifically of the scene where Luther comes across the man who murdered his parents. The thing that I've been telling people is that I've been dealing a lot intellectually, emotionally, with this whole theme of African-American forgiveness for the sins and the crimes that have been committed against us. It's become almost a cliche, I think, that every time there is some African-American man or woman who is unarmed and murdered by police, that the family extends forgiveness to them. Often, as somebody noted in one of these talks, often before they've even asked for forgiveness, forgiveness is always extended. And I have no complaint about that. I mean, that to me, that speaks of African Americans have always been a people of faith, and by and large of greater faith than, of more likely to be people of faith than the rest of the country, statistically. So to me, that speaks of, adherence to the dictates of faith. It speaks of a certain largeness of spirit. I'm not really upset with African Americans for offering this forgiveness, but I am vexed, I think, by the way that it has sort of become this trope, this cliche, to the exclusion of something else that should always come with forgiveness, which is accountability. The thing is that, people praise African American, the mother who's lost her child, or the brother in the case of Botham Jean in Texas, who embraced the police officer who entered her brother's apartment wrongly and killed him. He physically embraced her, and people have always praised this, and I have no problem with that. But I wonder, where is accountability? Where has accountability ever been in the annals of African American the sojourn here in these United States? I'm reminded that when Abraham Lincoln and his cabinet were discussing the possibility of setting the enslaved people free, his cabinet members, many of them were concerned. What are we know what we've done to them. What are they going to do if we set them free? What's going to happen? Well, how are they going to? Are we going to be okay? What's going to happen if we set them free? And what they found pretty uniformly was that the only thing African Americans ever asked, then or now, is leave us alone and let us have a fair chance, to put meat on the table and to take care of our children and our community. That's all that has ever been asked. And yet that's the thing that has routinely been denied. So it's fascinating to me that we sort of come around this thing of forgiveness. We've got 100, how many years is it since the Civil War, somebody? 160, 159 years, am I right? 159 years since the end of the Civil War. We've got 159 years of forgiveness. We have 159 years of forgiveness, but accountability seems to be lacking and lagging behind that. Again, you got to look back in history. You've got the men who murdered Emmett Till were never held accountable. People who the people who murdered Breonna Taylor in her apartment were never held accountable. The police officers who killed Tamir Rice were playing with a toy gun in a park in Cleveland were never held accountable. I mean, they lost their jobs, but they were never really held accountable. There's never really this standing to account. So, what Luther's dilemma is when he walks into that room is not forgiveness. Luther's not a forgiving kind of guy, especially having seen his parents killed. But it's, what does accountability look like? And it's 43 years too late for accountability. And as I said, the other great plot line is Adam trying to figure out how he's going to be with his mother and with himself, with the terrible secret that he's come into possession of. So I'm going to leave it at that and hope that I have arranged or raised some questions from you. Again, remember our deal. If you don't ask me questions, I'm going to ask you questions. And I think it's much better the other way around. We have microphones here on either side. One is manned, one is womaned over here. So please feel free.
So as you approach the mic, and I know you will, the online audience has beat you to it. We have a question here from the online audience. Leonard, first question. How much research do you do before you begin writing?
It depends on the novel, but the general answer is a lot. With this book, I read pretty much everything that I could find on the 1965 voting rights campaign, particularly newspaper and magazine accounts that took place, that happened then. The New York Times, and I believe it was the New Yorker magazine, had really excellent on-the-scene accounts. Because what you're looking for in writing historical fiction as opposed to writing history is you're looking for details. History will tell you it happened on such and such date and this happened and that happened, but you want the details that allow people readers to have a sense that they're there, to know what it felt like. So, you go to these sources and you're sort of combing them for the fact that, when Martin Luther King camped, in the campgrounds during the final march, he had a pink house trailer, That's the kind of stuff. It's little granular details, but that's the kind of stuff that helps to bring it alive. So, you do a lot of research looking for stuff like that. But this book wasn't my most research heavy. The previous book, The Last Thing You Surrender, was extremely research heavy because, again, this deals with the Civil Rights Movement and the Voting Rights Act, and I have some familiarity with those things. But the previous book was World War II. I've never served. I've never, never been to, much less been to war. And my concern was that I did not want to write a novel that a veteran, either, a veteran of that war or of any war, is going to look at and say, it didn't happen like that. It couldn't happen like that. So I was nervous as heck, about that when I over-researched. Thankfully it's paid off. I've never had a veteran come to me yet and say, you got it all wrong. So I was very pleased.
Another question from online.
Shoot. Online is lapping you guys. What's going on here?
They're dialed in.
Yeah.
Aside from regularity, what's the main difference between how you approach your novel writing versus how you approached your column writing?
Well, actually, it's not. Regularity is less a distinction than the person probably thinks, because even with writing a novel, it's regular work. You're writing 1,000 words a day, 7 days a week until you got a book. So it's definitely regular writing, just not in the same sense as a column. But the main difference for me is that in writing a column, I am bound by what the facts are. In writing a fiction, I'm bound, especially historical fiction, I'm bound by the facts, but I also get to play. And the best thing about writing fiction is that you create this world and you get to go play in it every day. And then the bad thing is when you're done playing it, when you're finally done and it's the end, you really miss it. You miss those people, you miss that world that you've created, those situations that you've created. But that's the main difference. I always say that nonfiction is about finding the facts and fiction is about finding the truth. And they are, they're related, but they're not the same thing. Hi there.
Hi. Thank you so much. I just loved listening to your writing, and I
Thank
got
you.
so it was like listening to a Russian novel. It's very descriptive, and I felt like I was right there.
That's
and
what I wanted.
I wondered what writers, when during your time, have really inspired you. Like, have there been something you've really admired, or something that you model your writing on, or is it just your own style?
Well, the first writer, you guys are going to laugh at me, but the first writer that I can remember reading and consciously imitating was Stan Lee. That's the first, that's my guy. That's my guy. That's the first writer I remember consciously imitating, saying, I want to do that, And it wasn't just the pictures and the drawings. It was Stan's words. I loved Stan's use of language. Beyond that, Stephen King is probably my literary North Star. I don't think he gets the respect that he probably should, because he's one, commercial, which is apparently a sin, and two, he writes horror novels. And people say, well, I'm not into horror. I'm not into horror either, but I'm into Stephen King, and those are two completely different things. The thing I like about King is that he can squeeze more out of a paragraph. He can get more of a paragraph than most of us as writers can get out of 2, 3, 4 pages. And I read his books, and you look at it, and it's like a magic trick, and you're watching close-up magic, but you still can't figure out how the trick is done. With most writers, I can figure out how the trick is done, But with King, I'm looking and I'm dissecting what he's written, and the trick has been performed, and it's right before my eyes, but I didn't see it, and that's an amazing thing. But in terms of, particularly in terms of characterization, his characterizations are so sharp that he can give you in a paragraph characterization. He can give you this person, and you'd know him or her if that person walked in off the street, because he's done such a good job. So that's the guy that that I admire the most as a writer.
Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome. There we go.
Can you tell us a little bit about your background, possibly where you were born, educated, and how that might have influenced you to write this particular novel that you're talking about today?
Well, I was born in Orange, California, and I was raised in Los Angeles. Spent the first 34 years of my life there. My first professional job, as a writer, I was a stringer, and then later the stringer means freelancer, and then later the editor of Soul magazine, which is a Black entertainment tabloid that was published out of Los Angeles between 1965 and 1982 or 3, somewhere in there. And I was there from 76 to 80. So, these fools are paying me to talk to Gladys Knight, which I would have paid them for, but tell nobody, don't tell anybody, but so that was my first job. I was a music critic. I went from there to, writing for various music and entertainment magazines. I worked for news radio station, 2 news radio stations in LA, KNX and KFWB. End of the 80s, I was working for Casey Kasem for his top 40, for his Casey's top 40 countdown show. Joined the Miami Herald in 91 as their pop music critic. Decided in 1994 that they sent me to another New Kids on the Block concert. I was going to take hostages. I had nothing to say with the 2 New Kids on the Block, so I petitioned for the right to write a column, and they allowed me to become a columnist, and I was a columnist for them from '94 till just a couple years ago, 2022. Always in there, I was writing novels, because my goal was actually not to be a columnist. Or a music critic. My goal was to be a novelist, and it took me until 2009 to publish my first novel, which is why I have an absolute hate for 25-year-old first-time published novelists. How did you do that? But things happen when they're supposed to happen, as I constantly remind myself. So published the first novel in 2009, which is called Before I Forget. And then 4 novels later, here I am with 54 Miles. And you asked how that's prepared me. I don't know specifically that my upbringing has prepared me, but what has really sort of pointed the way toward the kind of novels that I write is an abiding interest in African American history, and a realization that nobody's telling these stories, at least nobody that I've seen. And so, I decided that this was going to be something that I wanted to do. It's interesting to me because when I was in school, I didn't know that I liked history. When I was in school, I didn't know that history was enjoyable or entertaining or fascinating. It was literally when I was out of school and I went back and started reading contemporaneous newspapers. I read about the World War II, the outbreak of World War II from the Washington Post of December 8th, 1941. I read about the outbreak of the uprising in Watts from the LA Times in August of 1965. And you read it, it's like, this is fascinating. Why didn't I get any of this in school? It's like blood and sweat and terror and all this other stuff going on. And so that's what I want to create in my in my novels. I think that a lot of times kids think history is boring because we teach it with sort of this top-down mentality. Memorize this date, memorize this general, and all of that stuff. Right. I don't care about a date or a general. I care about what did it feel like. What did it feel like to be on that bridge? What did it feel like to be there in that moment? These are terrible things that were happening. So, that's what fascinates me, and that's what I try to convey in my novels.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Who's next?
Good evening.
Good evening.
So a couple things. One, I have been to the bridge.
You have what?
I've been to the bridge.
Me too. Yeah.
And it was so moving because I went to college in Alabama, and I have friends who are from Alabama, but they'd never been to the bridge.
Really?
And so I said, hey, you guys got to go. So we went. Also took my 98-year-old mother so that she could see that. But the two things. One, I want to say thank you for the style of incorporating history within the novel. Because as an educator, you bring a kid a book and they're like, get out my face, right?
Yeah.
They don't want to read. So, but I love that you say, hey, here's a novel, because they're okay with reading stories, but then this story is full of real things that actually happen.
Right.
So thank you for that. And then just as a person who grew up, born and raised in California, talk about that experience of when you went to Alabama and you had the opportunity to see the bridge in person for the first time.
Well, it's not just Alabama. I think I was probably fairly of age when I went to Alabama for the first time, but just the South, period, was kind of eye-opening to me. The thing about growing up in California is that the markers of segregation are not right there in your face, and there is at least superficial civility most of the time, especially in a city like LA. I didn't realize. It's kind of funny, but I didn't realize that LA was segregated when I was a child. But I did think LA was predominantly black, by a long shot, because the only white folks lived in Mayberry. Those of you who are old enough to catch that reference, and on the Ponderosa. Okay, that's where white people. Oh, and on Gilligan's Island. Okay, that's where white people live. They didn't live in Los Angeles. I knew this I didn't know this for a fact, and discovered differently one day when I was a kid. But growing up in that, and then going to the South, where it's not just this de facto, this sort of benign or relatively benign thing, but it's sort of there in your face, was a new experience. I remember going to Atlanta. It's a small thing. I was probably in my early 20s. I remember going to Atlanta for the first time. I was doing some research on a documentary about Dr. King. And I went to the hotel gift shop and I paid the lady for whatever it was. I was buying some gum or a newspaper or whatever. And I held up my hand for the change, and she pointedly put it on the counter. And at first I thought, okay, we've just miscommunicated, and it took me a while to realize, oh no, that's a Southern thing. She's not going to touch my hand, So those kinds of things were really shocking to me. The thing that I don't know what I want to say but the thing that appeals to me, that fascinates me about the South, just as a researcher, is that so much of the history there is still right there. it's still right in your face. It's untouched. It hasn't been, you know, they're doing it to a degree now, but it really hasn't been prettified that much. So you can go and stand in these places, and in a lot of these places at least, and they still look more or less like and feel more or less like they did back in the day. That's the thing that always jumps out at me about the South. I feel like in a lot of ways the South was more honest about its bigotries than the North, you know, which took me a while to really understand. But I feel like the South was, you know, at the very least, I don't know if this is something that you could say in its favor, but it's certainly a truth that the South was more honest, the South was more open about its bigotries than the North was, or for that matter, than California was. And these are things that took me a while to understand. Thank you.
Hello.
Hi.
I just wanted to say thank you. And I'm asking this question with the ancestors on our shoulders. Thinking about Toni Morrison and Gwendolyn Brooks, who share the designation that you do in terms of the Pulitzer Prize. But I wanted to ask a question about the obvious person in your story. And person, I'm using in quoting fingers, time and place. Can you talk to us about how you go through your process to actually bring time and place to your readers and your audience?
Well, as I said a moment ago, you spend a lot of time doing research and trying to find as much primary source material as you can. The other thing you do is you go there. I've been to Selma at this point, I don't know, somewhere between 6 and 10 times. But I went back for this particular book to walk. I wanted to walk where James Reeb was killed. I wanted to walk that block from the church to the spot where James Reeb was killed. And I was really pestering people trying to get the location of where was the SNCC office and, you know, all of this stuff, just so that I get the geography straight in my head. And obviously the bridge, you got to walk the bridge. Then there's a fictional town in the book that I, you know, created. And I didn't want it to be any real town because I wanted to do my own sort of things with it. And I went driving in North Alabama, somewhere east of Huntsville, just looking for just going through small towns, looking for one that would serve as a model for my little town, you know. And I finally, I don't remember the name of the town, but I found one. You know, had the Johnny Reb statue in the town square, which is what I was looking for and wanting to find. And just felt like, okay, you know, this is the place that's going to be, you know, my model in my head. So you do all of that stuff. I mean, you read everything that you can contemporaneous with that era. You go there. Sometimes I'll even read or look at movies and television shows or whatever. Particularly if it's an era or time or whatever that's kind of distant from me. I'll try to look at the media that were out then, just to get a sense of what people were seeing and what they were talking about. I'll read the books that they read and look at the movies they read and listen to the music they read. On my phone right now, I still have I don't know how many, probably a couple dozen World War II era songs, you know, Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy, and then a really racist piece of propaganda called "We're Gonna Have to Slap the Dirty Little Jap," which was very popular, but it gives you a sense of what the country, you know, where the country's head was. It was very popular in early 1942. So, you know, you do all that stuff, all of the above and then some.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Hi.
Hi. I just wanted to ask you could you speak more to truth in fiction? Is that what you said?
Yeah, I said that in nonfiction, you're looking for facts, and in fiction, you're looking for truth. Truth is built on building blocks of fact. And when I say truth, I'm not talking about, you know, I'm talking about the deeper stuff. The example that I use sometimes in speeches is that, you know, it is a fact that Neville Chamberlain went to Adolf Hitler and said that, and tried to appease Hitler and said, and came home holding a worthless piece of paper saying, we have achieved peace for our time. These are the facts. And you get the names and the dates and whatever. The truth that the world learned from that is you can't appease a bully. You see what I'm saying? So you have the facts, but what do the facts mean? What do they ultimately lead you to? Truth to me is deeper than facts. Because otherwise, if you have facts, you got this information here, this information here, this information here. But what ties them together? What do you take from that? What wisdom resides in that you can use to guide yourself or your country? Does that make sense to you? Okay. Hi.
Hi. I read your, you said it was your first book.
Which one?
Before I Forget.
Uh-huh.
I was so intrigued
Thank you.
by what was your source for that? It was like, as I recall, it's been a few years ago. So
Right.
my memory is a little lax, but it was almost like you wrote it in the first person, and I know that wasn't you.
No, I didn't write it. It's a third person book.
But it was so detailed in, how that could happen to someone, and the fact that they could document it ahead of time.
Well, again, believability lies in the details. You ever had anybody lie to you and they try to give you all the little details of the story, to make it seem truer? Basically, that's what fiction is. Fiction is I'm telling a lie. I'm creating a story. This didn't happen. I'm creating a story, but I'm giving you enough detail that you can feel that it happened. Not only that it happened, but that you were there and that you were an eyewitness. So yeah, with Before I Forget, that didn't stretch me so much because it involved a drive from Baltimore. Well, okay, I can go to Baltimore. That's no problem. I live down in Bowie, so I can go to Baltimore and drive around. Say, okay, that's what Baltimore looks like. And then they drove to LA. I'm from LA. So there wasn't a lot of settings issues on that. I put the characters in a house where I used to live, so that I didn't have to. I didn't have to worry too much about that. I kind of did that. I kind of did that in some ways on the cheap. The main issue of research for that book was there's a character who has Alzheimer's, and I went and sat in on an Alzheimer's support group a couple of times, and that really helped. But everything else from that book. One of the characters is a rapper, and I had to ask my kids. He's a rapper, but he's a really terrible rapper. So I think I asked some of my kids. I asked some of my kids to help me, construct a terrible rap for this guy. But research-wise, that was probably one of the easier books I've written. Thank you. Hi.
How you doing, brother?
I'm good. How are you?
Pretty good. I was going to say that the tactic of Dr. King, having the march across and March 7th, I just think that was critical, especially for America to see the humaneness of Black people and the violence that, our people were experiencing at that time. And just how effective do you believe that tactic was? And then also, on the other instance, when King brought the marches up, and I think it was about 2,500 marches, and he reversed and turned around. Turned around. Of course, I believe it was the federal order by President Johnson at the time. But aside from that order, what other rationale was it for him to turn around?
King, well, to take that question first, King had kind of boxed himself in. For those of you who don't know, the Bloody Sunday March was Sunday, March 7th. King goes on television that night or issues a call that night for a minister's march. We're going, to go across this bridge. And I don't think he had really thought that all the way through, to tell you the God's honest truth, because these ministers flocked to Selma, and they started arriving by the carloads and the bus loads on Monday. And so he's got to do something on Tuesday. But he does not have, he is to march would be to violate a federal injunction, which was the big issue. Now you got to remember that King has violated injunctions before, but he's violated them from the state. And, he's not losing anything as far as he's concerned, because these are state governments in the old Confederacy. It's not like, oh, if I make them mad, they're really going to hate me. No, they hate you pretty much already. So, he wasn't really concerned about violating that, but violating an injunction from a federal court. And the federal courts have been been friendly, or at least friendlier to the civil rights movement. That was a big deal. He really didn't want to have to do that. So he boxes himself in by calling all these folks, down, and he leads them on this turnaround march. And what also kind of complicates things is that the state troopers stood down. They stood to the side, like, come on and march if you want to. And it's like, this looks like a trap. You're standing there and you're watching the state troopers who 2 days ago beat everybody bloody and broken, saying, come on down. God, it's okay, come on. So I think with the federal injunction in mind and not trusting the benevolence of the Alabama state troopers, King was forced to turn around, and it was a humiliating moment. I wrote it's featured in the book, but it's a humiliating moment because he's already starting to lose the faith of the younger people. Okay, younger people are starting to turn against King. It gets worse in the next year or two, but they're already starting to turn against him. And for him to lead them into this humiliating moment only makes matters worse.
We have time for 2 more questions, one over there and one
We
right.
got 2 more people. That works.
Yeah.
Hi, thank you. I appreciated you bringing up the point about forgiveness and how pervasive it is, and that it's become cliche. And from what I gathered from how you're talking about it, I could sense kind of the activist in you.
The activist in me?
As you were talking about the lack of accountability that doesn't exactly follow or accompany the forgiveness.
Right.
So based off of that, and I wonder, what do you hope your readers leave after reading your book? How do you hope they leave your book after reading? Is there a sense of, through your method of writing, that you hope this new avenue would allow for some sort of call to action or an opportunity for moving forward? I'm just curious to see your internal workings,
right.
what you hope for.
Well, I mean, I always feel like a novelist who writes a novel in order to create a call to action. I guess it can work. I'm thinking of Upton Sinclair, and obviously John Steinbeck and a few others. But I think that by and large, if you want to write a call to action, then that's called a newspaper column or an essay. My first mission, I think, as a novelist is simply to tell you a story that entertains you, which isn't to say that the story is about nothing, but it is to say the first imperative is to make sure that you read the story and feel entertained. That said, I will say, and the elephant in the room that I know about and that none of you know about is that the ending of this book is rather shocking. And I can't wait to talk to readers who've read it, and so we can have a real, don't read the ending of the book. Come on, man. What are you doing? You read it? See, I can't wait to talk to readers we need to have a private meeting. I can't wait to talk to readers who read the ending of the book, because I want to get some feedback on that. But anyway, the point of the ending, and to your point, is that if there is not accountability, then the whole structure of what we call the justice system doesn't work. If there is no accountability, if somebody can kill you with impunity and nothing happens, then what does justice mean? What does the justice system means? And then you get things like what you know about and what nobody else knows about. Then you get stuff like that happening. So, I have to be oblique because I don't want to ruin the book for anybody else, but it kind of deals with that in its last pages. Just this whole idea that, the thirst for justice and for accountability when you've been done wrong is a primal and very powerful human, reaction. Somebody does you wrong, you want some accountability. You want somebody to stand up and at least acknowledge that some wrong was done. And for African Americans, so many times that doesn't happen. That doesn't happen. So yeah, exactly. Still, so if to the degree I want anything, social or political to come out of the book, I want people to be talking about the fact that How long can you deny people justice? How long can you deny them accountability and allow them and expect them to continue to believe in justice and accountability and in your system of supposed fairness? I think you're asking too much when you ask those things, quite frankly. Yes.
Just curious, do you play an instrument, and has Stephen King asked you to be in his band?
I play no instrument. I only sing around those who love me and will not therefore judge me. And yeah, I did perform with Stephen King's band, despite all of that. Right after after Hurricane Andrew, the Rock Bottom Remainders, which is an author's band, which Stephen plays in, appeared in Miami to raise money for people, who had lost their homes and everything. And it was me, Stephen King, Matt Groening, Dave Barry, Amy Tan, and a bunch of other folks that I'm probably forgetting. And I performed my heart out badly. And that's a long time ago. And it's taken a lot of therapy to try to forget that. So thank you. Thank you for bringing it back up. Are we done, sir? Are we?
Yes, please help me thank tonight's author, Leonard Pitts
Thank you.
Jr.
Thank you.
So we will meet you outside in about 5 minutes. Again, if you haven't purchased a book, Ivy's out there selling them, and Leonard will be happy to sign them. Thanks for coming out.